Natalie said, "You actually have very beautiful long dark red hair. I love that," she said, and I said I can dye it blonde if I need to, and then she said, "You know what I'm going to call the movie producer for the new Thor movie, because I definitely want you to be Thor," and that's how I became Thor in the first Thor movies. However, they kept Chris Hemsworth on standby just in case anything bad happens or they had to fire me, and I knew that wouldn't happen, and since I became Thor in the new Thor movie instead of Chris Hemsworth, I became a very famous actor, and since Natalie Portman already knew me, she also knew that I had many wives, but she married me anyway, and now I was telling her the truth about myself and Art the Clown, and she said, "My God, that's a lot to take in and think about, but it makes sense. I mean, it explains why Art can't die and why you have a god-like physique. So you read this book, The Hercules Method, and it has the power to turn any human into a superhuman?" And then I smiled and I said, "Yes, you can all read it too if you want to." And then all my human wives said, "We are definitely reading that book, The Hercules Method," and then they all read the book and they couldn't resist doing the training. And I noticed something very interesting. Not only did the women become perfectly curvy, but it enhanced them sexually. Their hair was better, even their private parts were better, and their sexual reproductive organs are better, and they all just look perfect now. So of course I couldn't resist having sex with them every day, and now they have sex with me all the time, which is insane, by the way. And when they all have babies now, it's a lot easier for them to go into labor and to recover from pregnancy, and they can have more babies. Basically, I kind of created the perfect human women, perfect for making beautiful babies with, and that means more soldiers to fight for the just cause of killing monsters and demons. And Chuck Shirley stayed with Sam and Dean for some reason this time. I guess he just likes that his story got more interesting with me around. I don't know, but things are definitely better. What I'm most worried about now is someone like Art the Clown getting out of prison, or someone like the librarian showing up at my front door. And then my doorbell rang and it was Vicky Hayes. She came back home with a pregnant belly, and Tara Hayes also walked in, and I said, "Hi there, are you staying, Vicky? Please stay, Vicky." And then Vicky Hayes said, "Of course I'm staying," and then she said, "I'd never leave you, you big dummy." And she said, "Wow, all of you look like you're in good shape." And then Dawn said, "Yes, you both might want to sit down for everything we are about to tell you. A lot happened recently." And Vicky Hayes said, "So you saved our lives that night, Mikey?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I did." And then she said, "I'm so sorry, Mike, I didn't know." And then I said, "I want to make one thing clear right now. I never lied to any of you. You all just wasn't asking me the right questions, but I also didn't want to tell you all the truth immediately because I was afraid it would freak you out, especially that night. I had to protect you girls, so I helped protect you all, and I made sure he couldn't get inside that building." So he was very angry when I went outside to confront him. "Art hates me. In fact, he's probably training in prison right now to kill me." And I smiled when I thought about what the clown is doing in prison while in solitary confinement. All this time he's been doing exercise day-night to break the restraints on his body and mind, and he's very motivated now to kill me. And Vicky Hayes read the book, but she said, "Damn it, I can't do the training yet." And she said, "No, I'm still going to try." And pregnant or not, Vicky Hayes did the Hercules Method training, and she made our babies healthier because she did that. And then the doorbell rang again, and then we all looked at the door, and then I said, "Who could that be?" But I already knew it's the librarian. And then I opened the door and I said, "Oh, librarian, how are you?" And then the librarian said, "So you know who I am?" And I said, "Of course I do, and you know who I am, you're no fool." And then he said, "Calm down, I didn't come here to fight you or challenge you, and I didn't even come here to kill your family or your friends, but I will be paying Sam and Dean Winchester a visit very soon." And I said, "They are hunters, and Dean Winchester once had Cain's mark, you know this, I'm sure." And he said, "Like I said, I don't want to kill your family or friends, but I'm wondering what will happen once you and your children kill all the monsters in the world. What then?" And then I asked him, "What do you want, librarian?" And then he said, "We arrange fights for people like us, you might enjoy them." And then he gave me a card and my eyes glowed bright and yellow. And then the librarian said, "So it's true, you also absorbed all the powers of Lucifer and you made his powers stronger." And then he smelled the air and he said, "One of your women are about to go into labor soon.